Bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got Bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got Bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs.
Bows and TKOs. We are live, episode 47, coming at you from the Valley. And do we have a great show today? For the weekly MMA podcast, we're going to talk about some fights that have been booked. We're going to talk about UFC 301, what went down in Rio de Janeiro. And then we are going to preview next weekend's fights that are happening. Fight night in St. Louis. Hopefully get a little bit more excitement from the fans there, as I'm a little bummed about the Rio de Janeiro showing. But we'll jump into that here in a minute. I'm your host, Shane Gillette. Again, if you guys like this weekly MMA podcast, UFC heavy podcast, please like and subscribe. That would mean everything. If you're tuning to the audio only, please add some reviews wherever you are streaming your podcast. So let's jump right in. We have Corey Sandhagen, Umar Nurmagomedov, finally official. This had been rumored for quite some time post Corey Sandhagen surgery, and it is now booked in Abu Dhabi on the August 3rd Fight Night card. That is going to be one hell of a scrap. We have Arnold Allen Giga Chikadze going down at UFC 304. The Manchester card is going to have one hell of a stand-up battle in that fight. And then we have the young Muhammad Mokaev taking on Manel Kopp for that UFC 304 card. See what the flyweights really about, matched up against some high-quality talent and a very good striker in Manel Kopp. We have Michel Pereira making a quick turnaround, taking on Roman Dolidze for the June 8th card. That is going to be one fun fight. That's the fight that I was calling for Michel Pereira's next opponent. So really stoked for that matchup. We have Peyton Talbot and Giannis Gamori on the June 29th card. Will be great to see Peyton Talbot on the International Fight Week Conor McGregor card. We have Haider Amil and Ji Young Lee July 20th. So some really good fights being booked. The announcement of Makhmud Muradov, he had pulled out of a couple fights recently. He will be off the UFC roster. And then the retirement of Matt Brown. The UFC did an awesome retirement video of all the highlights of the immortal and longtime knockout leader in the UFC, Matt Brown. Obviously, the Black Beast, Derek Lewis, has supplanted him there. But what a history and storied career by Matt Brown. So bravo to you, Mr. Matt Brown. We also had Mauricio Shogun Rua inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. I remember when Shogun was that guy for a long time in the light heavyweight division. So one hell of a career by Shogun. And then we have a prospect that I am watching out for, Richie Lewis, collegiate wrestler at lightweight, fighting for the LFA title June 7th. So we will be recapping that LFA card as much as I can anyways. But look out for Mr. Richie Lewis. But let's jump into what went down this weekend in Rio de Janeiro for UFC 301. I went 9-4 on the picks. That puts our overall record 47 episodes in at 293 wins, 144 losses, 6 no contest or draws. And on the year, 100 wins, 58 losses, 3 no contests or draws. But if I take a second, sit back after this card, obviously it had a lot to live up to, coming off the heels of 299, UFC 300, in my opinion, two of the better cards of all time. And if you're a Brazilian fan, or just a Brazilian in nature, you got to be happy because Brazil went 10-3 on the night. You can't ask for a much better record than that in front of the home country. But for that performance and how much Brazilian blood was on this card, I did think the crowd was quite underwhelming for what we have come to know for Rio. And that may be because they were missing that staple piece, the main event. But with the Brazilian fighter, every round 3 finishes on the main card, some quality main card fights. Jose Aldo obviously fighting a good amount of decisions. There was the terrible Jack Shore stoppage with the leg cut. Overall, I'll give the card a 6.5 out of 10. Solid card. I thought Jose Aldo put the team on his back. Some solid main card events. But I was just really bummed. The crowd really was empty until the final couple fights, and even then there was a ton of empty seats. There wasn't that zest that I thought with the return of Jose Aldo. Either way, though, some good fights we did not break down. Alessandro Costa had a round 2 TKO over Kevin Borjas. That was a performance of the night. 50 G's for Alessandro. And then one hell of a performance, a fight I did get wrong. We had Mauricio Ruffy with a round 1 knockout over Jamie Malarkey. Big time 50 G's for Mauricio Ruffy. Now, also before the card, we had the William Gomez fight called off as William Gomez got sick. He ended up making weight, but looked very, very bad on the scales, and he was even quite a few pounds under battling the sickness, so they ended up calling that fight off, so no William Gomez on this card. So we're going to kick this bad boy off in the early prelims. Brazil showing out as expected. We had Ismael Bonfim with a unanimous decision over Vince Pichel. And overall, I thought this was a pretty decent fight, a good battle. But the story here for me was really that Ismael was continuing to bring the fight forward, bringing the fight to Vince, bringing his power and brute force, and showing Pichel what he's about. I mean, some of the kicks and some of the power shots that Ismael was throwing and landing, they landed very solid. Vince was able to eat some big, devastating shots. Vince did get a takedown in round 1. That did not last long, and Ismael got one in the 3rd round, so there wasn't even much grappling here. I thought Ismael might bring the grappling a little bit more than what we saw. But, hey, Vince, for as old as he is, as many wars as he's been in, he is a tough out. I would have liked to see Ismael, get the grappling going, maybe try to get a finish in this fight. It seemed like he was a little bit conservative, just chopping away in this fight. But either way, huge win for Ismael. Tough loss for the longtime veteran Vince Pichel. Statistically, Ismael landed 112 total strikes, 111 of them significant, with 1 takedown and 2 attempts. And Vince landed 64 total strikes, 61 of those significant with a takedown. He was 1 for 2 as well. So Ismael starts a new winning streak. He moves to 3-1 in the UFC since 2022. And Vince extends his losing streak to 2. He has not won since August of 2020. But where do these guys go next? I would love to see Ismael take on Fares Ziam. I think that would be a wild fight for fans. And for Vince, if he wants to continue fighting and the UFC wants to keep him on the roster, how about Brad Riddell in his return? He was supposed to return. He had to back out of that fight, I think, due to injury or something. So Vince Pichel, Brad Riddell in the return fight, that's what I'm signing up for. Moving on into the prelims. Excuse me. No success here for Brazil. As expected, Drakkar close with the unanimous decision over Joaquim Silva. And this fight went exactly how I figured it would. Drakkar was getting the bigger strikes. He would be the one to mix in grappling throughout the fight. And although Drakkar didn't get a takedown, he had control of Silva against the cage throughout this fight. And as expected, Drakkar would be the one who landed the bigger strikes, and he was the one that brought in the grappling and mixed in the grappling throughout this fight. Now, although Drakkar didn't get a takedown, he had control over Silva against the cage throughout this fight for quite a few minutes. And the biggest threat that Silva had was a guillotine. He had Drakkar deep into a guillotine, and Drakkar, while he had him forward in a guillotine, lunged backward to try to get Silva to land on his neck and land on his head. It didn't quite get executed as Drakkar had hoped with the backflip, but what a savage move by Drakkar, man. I mean, this was a pretty tough and contested fight throughout, but another showcase in enemy territory for Drakkar Close, as he has really made impact in his return since injuries. And statistically, Joaquim landed 143 total strikes, 59 of those significant. He did have a submission attempt, a knockdown, and was 0 for 1 in takedown attempts. Jakar landed 96 total strikes, 70 of them significant. He was 0 for 7 in takedown attempts, but he did have 5 minutes and 33 seconds of control time. So although Joaquim landed more volume, a lot of it was ticky-tacky stuff up against the cage while Jakar was moving positions and control of the fight. You know, he had over a round of total time of control, and he did land majority of the significant strikes. Now, Jakar extends his winning streak to 4, all of these since 2022, and Joaquim starts a new losing streak. He moves to 2-2 since 2022. So what's next? Well, I say give me Jakar and Drew Dober in one hell of a showdown. And for Joaquim, he could square up with Mark DeCasey. I think that would be the appropriate next step for him. But moving on, another Brazilian defeat. About as self-explanatory of a fight as you would expect here. As Mictabek Oralbai had the unanimous decision over Elves Brenner. And this was a really dominant 2 rounds by Oralbai, specifically with his grappling, of course. And then round 3, it was straight chaos, as Elves did whatever he could do to get a finish and get the win. He went for broke. He's one of those shoot box boys, and they'll do what they got to do. But crazy enough, one thing you would not have expected is Brenner was even getting his own takedowns in round 3. It was a little too late. He had tired Oralbai out. But Oralbai looked like a classic Dagestani fighter in this fight, just smothering his opponents. Although he's not from Dagestan, he is going to be a problem, and nobody's going to want to mess with him, as Elves Brenner is going to be a guy that's a problem as well. Now, to look at the stats in this fight, Elves landed 79 total strikes, 48 of those significant. He did have 3 takedowns in 6 attempts. He had 2 reversals and 2 minutes and 55 seconds of control time. Surprising with those reversals, takedowns, and control time. He was 50% with his own takedowns, but any of those weren't until late in the fight. Now, Mictabek, he landed 83 total strikes, 65 of which were significant, so more volume. He also had 5 takedowns, although 17 attempts. You have to credit for Elves for the takedown defense. Mictabek did get a knockdown as well, which was the biggest moment in the fight, and he had 7 minutes and 12 seconds of control time, so he controlled a round and a half, 5 takedowns, out of 17 attempts. Not great, but he was going broke trying to figure that out, and that's why he gassed in the 3rd round. Now, Oralbai extends his winning streak to 8. He is 2-0 in the UFC. He does have very impressive wins now in the UFC in an early career. Seemed like he was just making his debut the other day. And Elves ends his 5-fight winning streak. He starts a new losing streak. So where do these guys go next? Well, I would love to see Elves and Jai Herbert. I think that would be one hell of a scrap. And give me Mictabek and Nazim Sadikov. I think that's the next one to make. And here, Brazil showed out a little bit over me. I've heard the hype around Yasmin Lacindo, but man, did she show off in this unanimous decision victory over Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And, you know, I rode with the dog in Karolina, the much more experienced veteran, but Yasmin was able to do whatever she wanted, wherever she wanted in this fight. You know, you would say she like big sistered her, but she's way younger, so she showed her big sister what's up. I mean, the storyline here, she was just way too powerful, very determined, and she was too quick for Karolina at this point in her career. Excuse me. So statistically, Yasmin landed 91 total strikes, 83 of those significant, and she had 2 takedowns in 6 attempts. She also had 5 minutes and 56 seconds of control time. And Karolina only landed about half that, 47 total strikes, 42 of them significant, and she didn't have any luck with takedowns. She was 0 for 2 in takedown attempts. So Yasmin extends her winning streak to 3. She is 3-1 in the UFC since 2022. She enters the top 15 at number 12. And Karolina extends her 4-fight winning streak. She starts a new losing streak and moves down 2 spots in the rankings to number 15. Where do these ladies go next? Well, give me the fun matchup between Yasmin and Lupi Godinez. I think that would be one hell of a scrap, a great prove-it match for her. And for Carolina, if she wants to continue to fight, I'm sure the UFC will be all for it. How about Poliana Viana? I would love to see that matchup. But moving on into the prelim headliner, what a dud this ended up turning out to be. I thought this had Fight of the Night written on it. We had Joe Anderson Brito with a round 2 TKO via doctor's stoppage over Jack Shore. And basically, Joe Anderson was all over Jack's lead leg. He had split open the shin, but there was no broken bones. The doctor checked it, like shoved 2 fingers in it. Why you would do that, I have no idea. It was just a hot mess. They called it off. Jack was not very happy about that. And there's no reason. This is MMA, the UFC of all places. Just because a guy is bleeding in his leg does not mean we stop the fight. We've seen much worse. There was no issue with this at all, besides the fact that Jack's leg was probably feeling it after, 20 plus kicks to that leg. So Brito came out of the gates hot here. He was coming out with a bunch of all powerful leg kicks, calf kicks. Jack was not able to check them. And because of this, after about only 5 of these kicks, Brito was pushing forward on Jack. Jack was basically resorting to grappling and was trying to get a takedown, but Joe Anderson had great defense. He wasn't successful in that, and he was able to keep Brito up against the cage to try to avoid kicks in round 2. But in the second round, Brito hit the shin again, really right on the bullseye, and that cut the leg open ashore. And it swelled up a ton. I mean, it was sticking out about this far from his shin, which is pretty nasty. But yeah, the doctor wanted to look at it, called it off. Pretty terrible stoppage again, no breaks. It barely just started leaking blood. And I'm not too sure what the doctor's thoughts were here. I mean, I know we've seen some nasty leg breaks and some things on the leg, but if we could have a hematoma on the forehead and different things that we've seen, I don't understand what the expectation was here. And who knows how the fight would have played out. This was heavily leaning to Brito. He was dominating Jack. I've never seen someone dominate Jack on the feet like this. He was clearly going to be down a round. Probably would have been down 2 rounds. Things would have really had to sway his way for him to get a win the second half of that second round and either get a knockout finish or a dominant third. Tough way to have a fight end, though. Put in that training camp, go into enemy territory, and you lose to doctor stoppage TKO. Now, statistically, Jack only landed 31 total strikes, 24 of them significant. He was 0 for 2 in takedown attempts. And Joe Anderson landed 57 total strikes, 30 of those significant. He had a takedown and 5 minutes of control time. So Brito extends his winning streak to 5. He's 6-1 in the UFC, including wins over Diego Lopez, Andre Fili, Jonathan Pierce, and now Jack Shore. Watch out for this guy. I mean, I was pretty high on Joe Anderson. I thought this would be a tough competition, but man, is he one hell of a striker. And has some decent grappling as well. But Jack, he starts a new losing streak. He's 2-2 since 2022. 1-1 now in the featherweight since he's moved up from bantamweight. So what's next for these guys? Well, I'd enjoy Joe Anderson and Sadiq Youssef. Stylistically, that's a yes, please for me. And for Jack, he could battle Fernando Padilla. And then moving into the main card, we had another dominant Brazilian showcase as Caio Borralho had Brazil up on their feet with a round 2 TKO over the legend Paul Craig. Performance of the night, 50 G's for Caio. Well deserved for him. Now, Caio honestly in this fight was just bullying Paul. He was aggressive. His striking had Paul pulling guard, doing the wild bear Jew things that he does, looking for leg locks. And in round 2, Borralho was able to get a knockdown, find a way to get the finish, and the stats will kind of tell the story here. Paul landed 22 total and significant strikes. He was 0 for 6 in takedown attempts. And Caio was 43 total, 36 of those significant with the knockdown. So as much as he was dominating It wasn't a ton of volume, but everything was landing clean, got the knockdown. Paul was trying to pull guard, get takedowns, do whatever he could. But Caio Borralho is becoming a massive problem in this division. Now, Caio extends his winning streak to 16. Sheesh. 7-0 in the UFC. He moves up 2 spots in the rankings to number 12. And Paul extends his losing streak to 2. These have both been at middleweight since he's come down from light heavyweight. He is 2-4 since 2022. So what's next? Well, the fight to make for me is Caio and Jack Hermanson. And for Paul, if he does continue to fight at middleweight, he could square up with Rodolfo Vieira. I think that would be an awesome matchup. But moving on, another completely dominant fight as Michel Pereira had a round 1 submission via guillotine choke. Gilly Gang over Ihor Potieria. Performance of the night, 50 G's for Michel. What a bonus machine he is becoming. And as Michel has continued to do, he came out wild and aggressive. He was able to land enough big shots. Did a crazy cartwheel kick that almost got him DQ'd as he had kneed a downed opponent. But that got him on top so he could get a submission finish. And it only took Michel 6 total and significant strikes with that submission attempt. And Ihor only landed 2 total and significant in this short notice bout. So Michel extends his winning streak to 8. He is 5-0 since 2022. And he moves into the rankings at number 13. Ihor starts a new losing streak, is 3-4 in the UFC. And before I even had provided my guidance, it's been booked. But I said, how much of a fun banger would it be to see Michel and Roman Dolidze? It's signed. It's agreed upon. Can't wait. And for Ihor, I'm not sure if he goes back up to light heavyweight or not. But if he does stay at middleweight, he could fight Nick Maximov, who we have not seen for some time. That'd be great. Moving on in the main card, another domination. The underdog I wanted to ride with, but didn't have the balls to do so. We had Anthony Smith with a round 1 submission via guillotine choke. Gilly Gang, man, over Vitor Petrino. And, Vitor came in hot looking to get a double leg. Anthony Smith said, nah, son, got the job done. And there was only 11 total strikes and significant with the submission thrown by Anthony. And Vitor landed 10 total and significant. He did get the 1 takedown in 2 attempts, but the 1 takedown led to the submission finish. I doubt anyone had Anthony Smith, in a minute, finishing Vitor Petrino. Vitor Petrino is going to have a great career, but Anthony shows that he is still a problem in the division. So Anthony starts a new winning streak. He is 2-3 since 2022. And Vitor suffers his first pro loss, ends his 11-fight winning streak, and moves to 5-1 in the UFC. So where do these guys go next? Well, give me Anthony and his lookalike, Bogdan Guskov, 2 thick, white, bald guys. And for Vitor, he could fight Kennedy and Shekwaku. But I love that Anthony Smith got this win. Well-deserved. Put the haters in their place. I really enjoyed my time at Nobu, I think it is, a nice sushi place in Miami before UFC 299, chopping it up with him for a while over espresso martinis. And you love to see classic OGs like this who have been counted out in their careers get a huge win. And I remember he told me before this fight was booked that it was booked about 4 or 5 days before it was announced. I didn't think he would do that, first off. But second off, he said, this young buck wants to learn. He's going to find out. And he backed his words up. You love to see it. So, finally, the return of the King of Rio, Jose Aldo, in brilliant display. Unanimous decision over Jonathan Martinez on home turf. And that's what the story of this card was. Yes, Alexandre Pantoja was the headliner, but Jose Aldo was stealing the headlines. And this is what had me hyped for this card. The excitement, the walkout, the whole situation being back in Rio, it was a sight to be seen. And again, I was a little disappointed by the way Rio showed out for him. But round one, first time back in a while, post, quote unquote retirement. I do think he took this fight to fight out his UFC contract. So if he wants to box or do other things, he can. But round one, it was just feeling things out. Jonathan's kind of a slow starter, a little bit of a counter striker. He's usually not putting the pace on people. So it was just, as the fight wore on, Jose's boxing was able to do work here. He was flowing. By round two, round three, he was in his zone. And Jonathan really didn't know what to do because he was pushing forward and closing distance. And Jonathan really lives, he's kind of a two-trick pony. He lives off those powerful kicks, landing kicks to the body, wearing on his opponents, then letting his hands fly. He wasn't able to get those powerful kicks off, body kicks, high kicks, until late in the second and maybe even the third round. He finally started throwing strikes and taking chances, but it was too little too late. I would have liked to see Jose be a little bit more aggressive here and get the finish. But he said openly he does respect Jonathan's abilities. He knows the danger that he has there. And at the age and all the things Jose has all been through, why risk getting finished yourself? But I thought he was in such a flow state and dominating, he could have been a little bit more aggressive and really put on for the fans. The stats tell a pretty good story here. Jose landed 101 total strikes, 77 of them significant. He had a takedown in 2 attempts, so 1 for 2, and 1 minute and 45 seconds of control time. So he really did dominate this fight with his boxing. Jonathan landed 80 total and 52 significant strikes, so a little more than 20 less in both categories. And he was 0 for 2 in takedown attempts and had 1 minute and 20 seconds of control time. Again, bravo to the King of Rio. All hell, Jose Aldo. He starts a new winning streak in his return from retirement. He was 2-1 since 2021 before he retired. He re-enters the rankings at number 8. Please, 4 pound, 5 ounce, baby Jesus. Can we get Jose Aldo a new contract in the UFC? Could you imagine the possibilities? The bantamweight division has so much talent. We could run it against OGs, Dominic Cruz like it was supposed to be. Henry Cejudo, the bantamweight champion, Sugar Sean O'Malley. I would love to see it. And Jonathan, though, he ends his impressive 6-fight winning streak, starts a new losing streak, stays in the rankings, but moves down 2 spots to number 14. Now, again, I'm not sure if Jose's going to fight in the UFC again, but I do think the no-brainer fight here is Henry Cejudo, former flyweight champion, and bantamweight champion. But I know there was rumors, or there wasn't rumors, it was even facts that Jose was supposed to fight Dominic Cruz. I would love to see that fight. That'd be a throwback of 2 elite WEC champions. It almost feels right. But I think Henry Cejudo is going to be the fight to make. And for Jonathan, he could take on another veteran, Pedro Munoz. Would love to see that one. But that set us up for the main event. We had Alexandre Pantoja with a unanimous decision over Steve Erceg. And this was just a classic Pantoja fight. I saw on social media a lot of people upset with the decision. I thought this was pretty clear as day if you ask me. Alexandre outworked Steve Erceg. He grinded him out. He wore on him with his grappling and wore him out on a path to victory, still in championship rounds. Now, I knew Steve wouldn't quite be ready for a grappler, an all-around package of a fighter that Pantoja is. He's not quite ready for that level because he's still new to the UFC. But man, did Astro Boy prove he belongs in the flyweight division and damn near at the top of it. I will say that much. I was impressed utmost with his takedown defense. I thought Pantoja was going to be able to get those easier. He really defended those well. And the fact that he brought offensive grappling to the table in this fight. I wasn't expecting to see that. He mixed open his grappling, handled awesome 50-50 positions. It was a fun little flyweight scramble in quite a bit of positions. I was actually really impressed, although I thought Pantoja clearly had won this fight. I mean, I thought Steve won round 2 and 4, and 2 was literally a 50-50 coin toss fight. So you could almost debate that he won one round, but I'll give him two at most. So I'm not too sure where people are saying he should have won the fight. But you can't trust MMA Twitter or X. People think they know shit and they don't. But if Steve would have been more aggressive late in this fight and didn't start wrestling and grappling, which, okay, he had success there, but you're not going to win a fight when you're down rounds. If he would have just, Pantoja was pretty tired and gassed late in that fight. If he would have just come in with his own striking and really looked to put the finishing touch on it with some nice shots, I think he could have won the fight with how gassed out Pantoja was. But that wasn't the game plan. It's hard to think of those. First 5-round fight for him. Either way, that's about as good as you can do in a loss in a main event, because he really showed the world that Steve Astro Boy Erceg is here, and he's here to stay. Now, statistically, Alex Chandre landed 143 total strikes, 125 of those significant, and he had 9 takedowns and 19 attempts, so almost 50%. He did have 8 minutes and 15 seconds of control time, so had more control time than a full round. And Steve landed 129 total, 111 significant, so he landed less in both categories, and he had 1 takedown and 6 attempts and a reversal. 1 for 6, not very good. He still got it, had some reversals, but still, I'm not too sure when he's down in that fight why he'd want to resort to grappling. Well, Pantoja extends his winning streak to 6, his second title defense, and Steve ends his 11-fight winning streak, starts a new losing streak, back to the drawing board, but nobody's going to want to call out Steve Erceg in the flyweight division. He does look pretty big for the division, because Pantoja is stout for a flyweight, and he was a lot taller and had size on him, so there has been a lot of things circulating about how long could Steve last at flyweight. He may have to move up to bantamweight. But Steve is now 3-1 in the UFC, and he does move up 1 spot in the rankings to number 9, which I think is deserved, although he lost to the reigning champ. And still, so Brazil, the 2 headliners getting wins, 10-3. Again, I'm just a little shocked about how the Rio crowd had showed up, but I think who's next for Pantoja is Amir Albazi for the flyweight title. And for Steve, I would like to see him fight Manel Kape. That just got booked that he won't fight him, but you never know with Mel Kape pulling out and having issues like he always does. I think that's going to be the most fun stylistic matchup out there. But this weekend, we have a back to the fight night cards, but one that is in a fun location in St. Louis. And I'm really intrigued to see how St. Louis shows up. Usually the Midwest really shows out for UFC, and I'm not too sure how long it's been, but they have a lot of hometown fighters on this card as well. I'd almost bet that St. Louis shows out more than Rio did for this fight night card, and it's going to be chaotic. But it is a little bit earlier for us West Coasters. The prelims are at 1 p.m. Pacific, the main card at 4 p.m. Pacific on ESPN, and overall, this is a solid fight night card. Really good matchmaking, and I don't really think there's much bad fights on this card at all. But some good fights that we will not break down. We have Jared Gooden and Kevin Jousset. And then we have Contender Series alum Billy Goff taking on Trey Waters. So those should be some good ones to tune in if you're going to watch the prelims. But we're going to start off early on the first fight of the night. We have the veteran J.J. Aldrich, 31 years old with a 13-6 record, taking on Veronica Hardy, 28 years old with an 8-4-1 record. Now, to give Veronica props, she has really revamped her career and her game plan after her, soft retirement due to concussion issues. And she has returned and worked with her husband, Dan Hardy, but is looking for her best win of her UFC career. I've been impressed by what she's been doing, but JJ at 31 years old is in her prime. She's coming off a really nice win at the end of last year, and it's going to be a doozy. Now, JJ trains out of Elevation Fight Team. She has a 3rd-degree black belt in Taekwondo, a brown belt in BJJ. She is an Invicta and Ultimate Fighter alum. She's on a 2-fight winning streak and is 3-2 since 2022. And she's on a 2-fight winning streak. 3-2 since 2022. And she has a 3.5-inch reach advantage. Now, Veronica's on a 2-fight winning streak since her return from retirement. But in this fight, I do think JJ is going to be too much with her striking. And if Veronica looks to mix in clinch or grappling, that might be her best bet. But JJ has improved in that department and is a pretty good all-around fighter in this division. For that reason, I'm taking the veteran JJ, but I'm avoiding this on any parlay where possible. Moving on, we have Jake the White Kong Hadley, 27 years old with a 10-2 record, taking on Charles Energy Johnson, 33 years old with a 14-6 record. And Charles is a St. Louis boy himself. Now, I really do think this is, that JJ Veronica matchup, very good matchmaking. Jake Hadley, Charles Johnson, really good matchmaking. These are such tight fights. Excuse me. And, Jake's nearing his prime. Charles is in his prime. And although Charles is in his prime and had some success, I do feel like he's somewhat in desperation mode. Both fighters have lost to Cody Durden last year by unanimous decision. And a lot of that was due to grappling. But it's a good measuring stick to have Charles Johnson here for him. Breaking it down, Jake is a Bellator, Cage Warriors, and Contender Series alum. He's on a 1-fight losing streak and is 3-2 in the UFC. 5 of his 10 wins are via submission, 3 via knockout. So 8 of his 10 fights come via finish. Charles trains out of Murcielago MMA. They've been on the radar lately, the Detroit squad. He's on a 1-fight winning streak, but is 3-4 in the UFC since 2022. And 6 of his 14 wins come via knockout. Now, I do believe Charles is going to have a slight striking advantage here, but he has really struggled in his UFC career for defending the takedown. And I do believe Jake is going to look for takedowns early and often here to get this fight to the canvas. But Charles is going to be scrappy and take risks, as he was on a 3-fight skid. And, you can't be losing to a 27-year-old up-and-comer in the division at this point in your career. Plus, you're in front of your home crowd in St. Louis. I am 50-50 here, but I am taking Jake Hadley, and again, avoiding this on any parlays. This is a true 50-50 toss-up fight. But then we move on. Another women's matchup. We have Tabitha Baby Shark Ricci, 29 years old with a 9-2 record, and the number 11 next to her name, taking on Tisha the Tiny Tornado Pennington. 34 years old with a 13-6 record. You may have known her as Tisha Torres before marriage and a baby. That's why she's been out for a while. But I am excited to see Tisha after her 2-year layoff since having a baby with current champion Raquel Pennington. Tisha did lose a very tough fight against Mackenzie Dern before she departed, but she's always been a problem for the division. The problem is, I kind of see her as she's facing the younger version of herself who's been cruising through her competition in this fight. But breaking it down, Tabitha has a black belt in BJJ and judo. She's an LFA alum. She's on a 1-fight losing streak, but is 3-1 since 2022. And Tisha has a Taekwondo, Muay Thai, Karate, and BJJ style. She trains out of ATT. She has she was the 2013 women's fight of she had the 2013 women's fight of the year against Rose Namajunas. She's an Invicta and Ultimate Fighter alum, and she's on a 1-fight losing streak. She's 3-1 in her last 4 fights. Now, both of these women live on pace and volume, so this should be a very fun fight for the fans. I do think that Tabitha's judo and grappling ability should pay dividends in this fight and give her opportunities where she has moments up against the cage, maybe get some takedowns. I don't know really what Tisha has been up to. Is she going to be coming in shape? Has she really been training? Her wife is the current champion. They typically are gym rats, so she probably will come in shape, but there's a lot of question marks there. And again, this is another very tough fight to pick. But I am taking the younger fighter who I do think will have a speed advantage. For that reason, I am taking Tabitha Ricci. I am putting her on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Terrence T-Rex McKinney, 29 years old with a 15-6 record, taking on Esteban El Gringo Rabovics, 28 years old with a 12-1 record. Now, Terrence, man, his career has been a wild one. He's had moments where he lacks technique and IQ, and then there's moments where he looks like a world beater. But Rabovics, he's not much younger than Terrence. He's a little bit newer to the UFC. This would be a big highlight win for him, while Terrence is looking to stack more wins, have a chance to another chance to crack into the top 15 of the division in his prime. Breaking it down, Terrence has a purple belt in BJJ. He has a D2 wrestling background out of North Idaho College and Chadron State College. He has the fastest finish and knockout in UFC lightweight division history, which was 7 seconds against Matt Frivola. He's a Contender Series and LFA alum. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. He is 4-3 since 2022. 8 of his 15 wins are via submission, 7 via knockout. So all 15 of his wins come via finish. 4 of his 6 losses are via knockout. So, he is a little bit susceptible to the big shots. And he does have a 4.5-inch reach advantage. Now, Esteban is a Contender Series alum. He's on a 1-fight winning streak. He is 2-1 in the UFC. 6 of his 12 wins come via knockout, 5 via submission. So 11 of his 12 wins via finish. We have 2 finishers in this fight. As a typical Terrence fight, I would expect him to come out aggressive in round 1. He has started to show some patience here of late. But Esteban is going to be open to scrapping and throwing hands. So this should be a fun one. It really is another very close 50-50 shot. But for the sake of picking, I'm taking the dog. I'm taking Terrence McKinney. But I'm avoiding him on any parlay where possible. Moving on. We have Chase the Dream Hooper. 24 years old with a 13-3-1 record. Taking on Vyacheslav Slava Borshev, 32 years old with a 7-3-1 record. Now in this prelim headliner, we get to see the young Chase try to grapple and hang with the heavy-handed and big swinger and Vyacheslav, who is looking to get momentum and stack up wins while he's in his prime. And a reminder, Chase, although he's been in the UFC for quite some time, only 24 years of age. Enumclaw represent, baby. But breaking it down, Chase has a black belt in BJJ. He's a Contender Series, Cage Fury, Island Fights, and Titan FC alum. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. He is 3-1 since 2022. 6 of his 13 wins are via submission, 4 via knockout, so 10 of his 13 wins via finish. And he is rocking a 5-inch reach advantage in this fight. That boy long. Now, Vyacheslav, he trains at a Team Alpha Male. 6 of his 7 wins are via knockout. He's an LFA, Titan FC, and Contender Series alum. And his last fight was a draw, but he is 3-2-1 in the UFC. When you know about Chase and his fights, he has been known at times to just abandon his striking, pull guard, go leg hunting, a lot like we saw from Paul Craig last weekend. But he is very, very creative and slick with his BJJ. I think he may look to use his length to keep Slava at range, score some strikes to win rounds, but I do expect him to get Vyacheslav to the mat, and he doesn't have the best grappling. I doubt he's going to be able to defend what Chase is doing jiu-jitsu-wise. For that reason, I'm taking Chase, the Dream Hooper. I am putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on to the main card. What a banger this is going to be. We have Robelis, the big boy to Spain. 35 years old, undefeated with a 5-0 record. Taking on Waldo Salsa Boy Cortez Acosta. 32 years old with an 11-1 record. Now, I'm super excited for this fight to kick off the main card. I was lucky enough to see Robellis in his UFC debut, and he's just a freak of nature, man. He is something else. He is literally a specimen. He's only 35 years old and is going to have his shot versus big names here. Here he's getting a boxing stud who has been impressive in his young UFC career and is in his prime as well. Breaking it down, Robellis has a Taekwondo style. He was a gold medalist in the 2012 Olympics for Taekwondo. He has the longest reach in UFC history, 87-inch wingspan. He's a Titan FC and Fury FC alum. He hasn't fought more than one round in his pro career. All 5 of his wins come via knockout, and he has a 17-inch reach advantage in this fight. Holy moly, man. Now, Waldo is a Bellator, LFA, and Contender Series alum. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. He's 5-1 in the UFC. 5 of his 11 wins come via knockout. Now, this really is going to be a fun striking battle, and I would think Waldo is going to be able to control the pace, but with Robellis, distance is going to be hard to get in range and fire away, especially with the different angles and strikes that Robellis attacks with. That really is that Taekwondo background. But this is going to be a big measuring stick for Despain and let us know what he's capable of. For the sake of picking, I will take Robellis to Spain because I don't think Waldo sports much of a grappling issue. It's going to come down to striking. With that power, with that range, it's going to be too much. For that reason, I am putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres, 35 years old with a 21-14 record and the number 15 next to his name, taking on Sean the Sniper Woodson, 31 years old with an 11-1 record. And man, what a fight this is. Another St. Louis guy with Sean Woodson. I think this has potential fight of the night written all over it. Both of these dudes in their primes, 35 and 31. They're both looking for another quality win to continue move up right into the top 15 in the rankings. And Alex, he's had really great moments in his career. He's battled back and forth with a very good striker in Giga Chikadze in his last fight. And Sean is coming off one of the better wins in his career with a razor-thin, close split decision victory over Charles Jourdain. Now, Alex is a southpaw fighter. 3 of his last 5 fights have been fight of the night or performance of the night. He's showing up. He's showing out Bruce Leroy's style. He is a King of the Cage and Ultimate Fighter alum. I've been watching him since the Ultimate Fighter days. He's a great fighter. He's on a 1-fight losing streak. He is 2-2 since 2022. 7 of his 21 wins come via submission, and 7 of his 14 losses are also via submission. Now, Sean trains out of Glory MMA. He is an RFA and Contender Series alum. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. He is 2-0-1 since 2022. But he's a long sniper, man. He's got 4.5-inch reach advantage and a 3-inch leg reach advantage. I do think Alex's striking is going to be unique for Sean here. And Sean's going to keep Alex at distance, pick away with him like he did in the Charles Jourdain fight. But I do think both fighters are going to be attacking lower legs, attacking the calf as well. But for me, Alex is going, he's been fighting at a high level for quite some time. He's going to let his creativity go to work. I think he will find a way to find openings against the longer Sean Woodson. But Sean has very, very good technical striking. I don't know if it's going to be enough to get a win here. And he has been known to empty the tank if he gets pushed into later rounds. For that reason, I'm taking another dog. I'm taking Alex Caceres, but I am avoiding him on any parlay. This is one hell of a fight here. Moving on in the main card, we have Matusz Chinzik Rebecki, 31 years old with a 19-1 record, taking on Diego Ferreira, 39 years old with an 18-5 record. Now, the odds suggest that Rebecki is going to run through Diego, But this is a big fight up for Mateusz. I mean, he's taken on a very tough and dangerous fighter who is a big-time heavy hitter. I think is very well-rounded in the lightweight division. And I think this is a lot closer than the odds suggest. Now, part of the reason might be because Carlos hasn't been super active, but he was stacking up wins in the UFC. And man, not only hasn't been super active, but was stacking up wins in the UFC until he ran into the gauntlet. Beneil Dariush, Gregor Gillespie, wonder if he's ever going to come back, and Mateusz Gamrot. I mean, one hell of a gauntlet. But breaking this fight down, Mateusz trains out of ATT. He's a Dana White Contender Series alum. He's on a 16-fight winning streak, 4-0 in the UFC. 9 of his 19 wins are via knockout, 7 via submission, so 16 of his 19 wins come via finish. Now, Diego, he has a BJJ style. He trains out of Fortis MMA. He has a third-degree black belt in BJJ. 4 of his last 5 fights have been performance of the night or fight of the night. He's showing up. He's showing out. He is a Legacy FC alum and former champion. He's on a 1-fight winning streak and is 1-3 since 2021. He has lost the past few years due to injury and has struggled to make weight in a couple of his last fights. Lots of question marks with this guy. 7 of his 18 wins come via submission, and 3 of his 5 losses are via knockout. He has been known to take a lot of risk, especially earlier in his career. He has an 8-inch reach advantage and a 4-inch leg reach advantage. That length is no joke either. Now, Carlos' last fight since 2021 was a knockout finish versus another striker in Michael Johnson. But he's taken on a man who is full of confidence, he's a finisher, and is in his prime. Now, Carlos has a lot of length to use for an advantage, but he isn't a guy who just sits there and jabs out his opponents and keeps them at distance. He likes to rush in and fire off combinations. I think this fight, again, is a lot closer than the odds suggest, but it's hard for me to take a 39-year-old lightweight unless he can get the finish. And Runbecki, I mean, he's been looking good. So I'm going to take Mateusz Runbecki. I am avoiding this on a parlay, though, although the odds are very heavy in Mateusz's favor. Moving on. In the co-main event, we have Carlos Black Jag Olberg, 33 years old with a 10-1 record, taking on Alonzo Atomic Menefield, 36 years old with a 15-3-1 record and the number 11 next to his name. Now, this is another hard-hitting striking battle that's going to set the tone for the rest of the main card in front of St. Louis. And Alonzo, he's looked the best he has ever against a very good Dustin Jacoby just 6 months ago. So now we get to see him against another hard-hitting power striker in the middle of his prime and full of confidence. Breaking it down, Carlos trains out of City Kickboxing. He was a King of the Ring kickboxing champion in 2017 and 2019. So he's used to fighting often and putting a lot of fights together in a short period of time. He's a Contender Series alum. 6 of his 9 wins are via knockout. He's on a 5-fight winning streak, 6-1 in the UFC, and he has a 2.5-inch reach advantage. Now, Alonzo is a Bellator, RFA, LFA, and Contender Series 2-time alum. Been everywhere, man. He's on a 4-fight winning streak. He did have a draw in between. 10 of his 15 wins are via knockout, 3 via submission, so 13 of his 15 wins are via finish. Now, Alonzo just ran through a very high-level kickboxer with a lot more MMA experience than Carlos, and I'm not too sure what's going to be different in this fight. Alonzo isn't scared to close distance, make the fight ugly, and I'm not sure how Carlos is going to respond when a guy is coming forward in his face the entire fight. But Carlos does have serious power, he has good kicks, and he's going to have his moments, but Carlos definitely isn't a grappling threat, and I think Alonzo is going to have a favor there as well. Alonzo is more well-rounded. You got to watch out for that left hook of Olberg. But I'm taking another dog. I'm taking Alonzo Menafield. But I am not putting him on a parlay where possible. I'm riding with some of the dogs this weekend. The dogs are here to eat. I guess that wasn't a co-main. I misspoke. In the co-main, another St. Louis man, Joaquin Numansa Buckley. 30 years old with an 18-6 record and the number 11 next to his name, taking on Nursultan Black Ruzaboev. 30 years old with a 34-8-2 record. Now, I'd have to assume the only reason Nursultan is getting a top 15 fight already in his third UFC fight is because he was the one of the only guys in the division willing to fight Buckley on short notice in front of his hometown crowd. Now, Buckley has dominated since moving down to welterweight, and Nursultan is a really good newcomer to the UFC. You know, he's a veteran of mixed martial arts, and he's a tough out for anyone in his prime, so strap in, this is about to be a banger. Breaking it down, Joaquin trains out of Murcielago MMA. He had the 2020 Knockout of the Year against Impas Kasaganai. He's a Bellator and LFA alum. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, all in welterweight, and he is 5-2 since 2022. 13 of his 18 wins are via knockout, and 4 of his 6 losses are via knockout. So to knock out or be knocked out. Now, Nursultan has a purple belt in BJJ. He trains at Renzo Gracie Philly. He's a Fight Nights Global and Brave alum. He's on a 10-fight winning streak, 2-0 in the UFC. 20 of his 34 wins are via submission, 12 via knockout. So 32 of his 34 wins come via finish. And he does have a 4-inch leg reach advantage. Now, Nursultan has some really good unorthodox striking, but I don't think that's going to be enough in this fight, especially on short notice. He is a lot bigger fighter than Buckley, and he's going to have that length advantage. But both men are also fighting on short notice here. You know, Buckley has fought very impressively and has fought a lot stiffer competition. I do think Nursultan's path to victory is going to be to try and take Buckley down, but Buckley has really improved in that area as well. For that reason, I'm taking the St. Louis man, Buckley. I'm putting Joaquin Buckley on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on to the heavyweight main event. We have Rodrigo Zecolmeya Nascimento, 31 years old with an 11-1 record and the number 15 next to his name, taking on Derek the Black Beast Lewis, 39 years old with a 27-12 record and the number 12 next to his name. So here we get another heavyweight main event for Derek Lewis, and I highly doubt it's going to last 5 rounds in this Clash of Styles showdown. Derek, in his career, has faced many grapplers over and over in his career. He's had very mixed results, but don't sleep on Rodrigo's striking in this fight either. Breaking it down, Rodrigo trains out of American Top Team. He has a purple belt in BJJ. He's a Jungle Fight and Contender Series alum. He's on a 3-fight winning streak. It should be 4, but it was overturned due to a positive test for Ritalinic acid. 6 of his 11 wins are via knockout. Now, Derek has a purple belt in BJJ. He has the most knockouts in UFC heavyweight history with 14 of them things. He has the largest comeback finish by striking deficit in a finished fight. He had 82 less strikes against Alexander Volkov in the comeback victory. He had the 2018 comeback of the year in that fight against Volkov. He's a RFA Bellator Legacy FC alum and former Legacy FC champion with 1 successful title defense. 22 of his 27 wins are via knockout. 7 of his 12 losses are also via knockout. As is life in the heavyweight division, to knock out or be knocked out. Now, Derek Lewis has power that is unbeaten. He is the UFC's knockout leader for a reason. he finds ways against heavyweights who want to grapple him with nice uppercuts when they're coming in or knees and other attacks. I was able to see his insane knee in his last fight that messed up that guy's jaw early on in the fight. And I didn't think he'd win that fight. But I really don't see, without a knockout early, how Derek is going to be able to beat Rodrigo, who is very well-rounded. He's a tough, durable fighter and has good cardio for a heavyweight, which definitely could pay dividends in this main event. You know, if he can get the fight to go longer, wear on Derek, tire him out, the very good Derek Lewis, that should pay massive dividends. I doubt it goes 5 rounds. Derek has definitely been in improved shape, but I am taking Rodrigo Nascimento. I am putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. But that's the St. Louis card. Again, we have the Black Beast headlining Joaquin Buckley for St. Louis. A really great matchup in Olberg and Menefield. A big test for Olberg. We have, I still think, a really good matchup with Mateusz Renbecki and Diego Ferreira. Although the odds suggest this should be a butt-kicking. Fight of the night potential in Alex Caceres and Sean Woodson, another St. Louis guy. The crazy long taekwondo artist Robelis de Spain taking on a good striker Waldo Cortez Acosta. Even in the prelims, Chase Hooper, Terrence McKinney, Esteban Rabovics, a mirror matchup in Tabitha Ricci and Tisha Pennington, Jake Hadley, Charles Johnson for another St. Louis man, and then J.J. Aldridge, Veronica Hardy. A lot of great matchmaking. Let's see how St. Louis represents. I expect to see a Bud Light and a lot of cheering. But that sets us up for next week. We're back to the Apex for another fight night card. It isn't as deep, but it does have a few really awesome fights, including the headliner between Edson Barboza and Lerone Murphy. I can't wait for that matchup. This is episode 47. I'm your host, Shane Gillette. See you next week.